because it was just so intimidating to me. And that first month, somebody just said, "Wow, you're a dominant." I'm like, "What?" And they're like, "Yeah, it's," and I'm like, "Oh, okay, I guess I'm a dominant." And so I started um, playing with other experienced submissives. So I learned uh, a lot of my craft the same way I grew up, as learning from the people that were around me, which were women. And so I learned what women wanted from my growing up, and I learned what submissives wanted from my um, early years as a lifestyle dominant. And so that's where I learned what submissives wanted, and my submissives are female because I am heterosexual. Just my choice. Um, my the way I'm built. Um, and so I learned from them what women wanted when they submit, and that's the approach that I take now. Is I know that women want a safe place to be. They want to know that they're going to be safe with whoever they're playing with, and so that's where it worked up to. I had live-in submissives. Some of them are, think of themselves as slaves. Some of them think of themselves as a pet. Some of them think of themselves as just a submissive. But I've had up to three at a time living in my household, and you learn a lot from that too, because having three submissives in the same household is another challenge.
It only sounds
And
cool.
it sounds cool. It can be a pain. No, you're not having threesomes all the time or ever, because that just doesn't work out that way. Sorry. Um, but
It's interesting. I sit here and think that there's some more parallels between our history. So, little known about me, I was raised Lutheran. I was actually private school most of my life. I was a church acolyte, went through confirmation, so on and so forth. Like you said, Sunday church wasn't an option, right? And then come college, I got the ability to make some of my own choices. And Sunday, after a long Saturday night of church, didn't really sound too fun. Nonetheless, I, just as you, distanced myself from the church, and from a lot of things, like from my family put in me. I was trying to identify who was Dustin and who was, my mother's son, so to say.
Yeah.
Right. I too was raised with a very powerful woman. Nonetheless, I've reflected on a lot of this and why I've gravitated back to MS structure and BDSM. And this is probably the first time I've really even admitted this out loud. But I think a lot of it does stem to my upbringing. I was raised in a very structured household. And when I separated from dogmatic religion, I missed that structure. I missed that consistency. And also, I missed having faith in something larger than myself.
Yeah.
And for
I
me,
understand
a
that.
lot of what BDSM is my spirituality.
And you're not the only one. I have heard several people say, my religion is BDSM because it has so much spiritual meaning to me. My submissive in Washington, Rebecca, she was a preacher's kid. And so she grew up in the Southern Baptist Church too. And so we have a lot of those parallels. And we like, you know what? This is who I am. And and we both are like, there were things about going to church that are deep inside of us. Like I can go into a church and just feel the energy in the space. And I'm like, I love this feeling. then when people get there, it kind of ruins everything. So
Fair. I think I don't want to get too lost into religion out of respect for people, but I think it is important that to know that most of us stem from very traditional backgrounds or a variety of backgrounds, right? And it's not that we all started out as deviants, so to say, right?
right. I started out very vanilla, very just Southern Baptist, good Southern boy, and my mom is still in that mindset of, oh, it's my son, my baby. I'm like, yes, ma'am, I am still your baby.
Where
And when I
my
go
mom
visit my
listens to
mom,
my podcast.
my mom is not going to watch this broadcast. And I am still her. And last trip to Mississippi, I went to my home church, and everybody that I knew now was old for some reason. I left there when I was 16, and I'm now in my early 50s. So it's been a while. But, a lot of the same people are exactly in the same place they were 40 years ago. So
That was one of
I'm
my
glad I'm
things.
not.
Is a big part of reason why BDSM is my spirituality is because it's about growth and experience. And that's one of the things that I miss from dogmatic religion.
Mhm.
And like you said, every once in a while I'll go back to my old church. And like you said, the people are sitting in almost the exact same pew, right?
Yeah, they're sitting in the same spot.
Yay for consistency, but at the same time, like, in my opinion, life's more about growth and experience. And also,
They
like,
have not grown at all.
exactly. And that's just such a huge part for me. Now, with that said, I definitely have faith in something larger than me.
Yeah.
What that is, I haven't really defined it. It seems like there's been a lot of people that have defined it already, so I'm sure one of them are right, and I'll probably
Yeah.
pick one eventually.
I got my values from growing up Southern Baptist. Those values stuck with me, honesty, respect, acceptance, all those things. I was taught that, I was taught that we are accepted into the great family. And I just sort of like, oh, okay. So I learned to accept people for who they are and where they are. Well, Southern Baptist is a little different nowadays, but
Well, and after this, we'll branch out away from religion. The two
right.
things that always made sense to me since I've heard them when it comes to religion is God is good orderly direction. Most gods, that's a good definition for them. So that's always stuck with me. And then the other one that's kind of stuck with me is the Bible is basic instructions before leaving Earth. And that goes back to like your statement of values and ethics. I've spoken on it very publicly that I'm an ethical psychopath. And the world should be very thankful that I have ethics. And part of my ethics stem from my structured upbringing.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, there you go. So yay for ethics.
Yeah. You don't have to be religious to have ethics and have values.
No, you don't. But at the end of the day, like most people, that's where a lot of their value system stems from.
Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Add something else.
All right, let's move on. All right. So our next question is, how did your early experiences with strong women influence your understanding of dominance and submission?
I didn't have a strong understanding of, I had a strong understanding of authority. My mother had authority over me. She also had power over me, and her mom had power over her, but no longer had authority. So when you grow up, you sort of like leave the nest, and no longer does that person have authority over you. Can my mom get me to do almost anything she wants? Yes, she still has a lot of power over me because of she's my mama, and I'm a good Southern boy when I go home. Um, but there wasn't any kind of, there was the authority structure that we all grow up with. The adults have authority over children. Police have authority over you. The government has authority over you. Uh, Growing up with strong women in my life, I came to see that women can do anything. My grandmother, uh, short little aside, I learned never to go into a woman's purse. My grandmother taught me this: never go into a woman's purse. And to this day, I am very reluctant to go into a woman's purse because my grandmother told me not to do it. I realized years and years later she carried a 45 Magnum in her purse. And she didn't want me shooting people. So, but that has stuck with me. And I still have problems going into a woman's purse. Even if she says, go get this out of my purse, I'm like, oh, here's your purse.
Yeah.
You get it.
Yeah.
So growing up with the strong women didn't influence my ideas of dominance and submission, but it gave me a good power structure of authority, of a good authority structure, and learning what women wanted by the trials and tribulations that these women went through. An example is my dad is not a very good partner, wasn't a very good dad. He's still alive, I guess. I haven't talked to him in 23 years, so I assume he's still alive. But my mom would tell me, when you get a woman, make sure she knows that she means the world to you. Make sure that you do things, little things for her. Make sure that you help out with the housework. Make sure. And one day I wrote a Mother's Day card, and it says, all those things you told me to remember, and I wrote down some of them. And you open it up, it says, I listened. And so I learned that just because I am master or dominant does not mean that I don't give back to the people who give themselves to me. I take care of them because that's part of my job. That's the way my mom did with me. She took care of me until I was old enough to leave. So I think that the taking care of and providing a safe space are the two biggest things that growing up with strong women taught me.
I really appreciated your dive down differentiating between authority versus power,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you're right. In the same thing, I'm kind of a traditional man, and my mother says stuff, and I'll listen like no other woman on this planet, right?
That's right.
She's my mother, and she'll always have some level of power over me, but that does not mean she has authority, right?
Right.
And I was sitting here just kind of wrapping my head around it, where was the time that she lost authority? Well, probably when I went off to college and I stopped going to church and I started making all these decisions for myself. But did she still have power? Absolutely. She was still very influential early on in life on, what I did, what I didn't do.
Mm-hmm.
I remember the first time I got in trouble with jail. I was more worried, or with the cops. I went to jail freshman year of college, and I was more worried about my overnight jail stay that my mom was going to find out than me getting in trouble for being intoxicated. Like that wasn't a concern. Oh, underage intoxication? Who cares? Don't tell my mom, right?
Don't tell my mom, please. That's where the big trouble comes from. Because,
Absolutely. And I remember it was right before Thanksgiving, and I was just so nervous. But
did she find out?
I told her. I was honest with her. And see, that goes back to like, I grew up with just my mother. My father wasn't around either. A lot of the influential and powerful people in my life, whether it's been my mother or one of my main CEOs for 8 years was a powerful woman from South Africa. Nonetheless, one of the biggest things that my mom taught me was full and honest disclosure, right? And she really ingrained into me that if she couldn't be honest with me, that I couldn't be honest with her. So as much as I didn't want my mom to find out, I think a lot of it boiled down to was I didn't want somebody else to tell her. That was my responsibility, right?
Yeah.
She deserved more respect than that. But I digress. All right. So carrying on with the actual topic, I love all this bouncing around. Once again, like this is the goal of the show, is to be very conversational and getting some of this raw information. I mean, I publicly admitted to things tonight that I don't know if I've ever verbally said to myself in private. So I might have to go back and listen to it.
I've got to take credit for that. I'm awesome.
Man, look at you. You're professional. I mean, you are a professional, and it's about getting people to communicate. So you are pretty good. You're making me feel safe, Jareth. I appreciate you. Thank you.
You're welcome. I am glad you feel safe, that you just can let
my next
everybody
question I have for you is, what were some pivotal moments or experiences that has led you to explore your kinky identity?
I have Rebecca in a chat over here, and she's like, I'm going to give you hints of stories. And so right now, I'm waiting for something to pop up. One of the pivotal moments was that person who had a lot of honesty issues. That taught me a lot about honesty and how important it is. I've had fairly recently someone who this is the only time I have done such a bad job of reading somebody's reactions to me. And I led this person, and from her responses, I was leading her down the path of learning how to submit to someone, how to learn how to trust somebody, she's had a lot of bad experiences with guys. And so she wanted to build a trust, and she had the fantasy of somebody stalking her. I'm like, I'll stalk you. So, I put Life 360 on her phone, and I just knew where she was, and I would text her at random times. And it's like, hey, I see you're at the florist.
You're park like, crooked.
She's like, oh, that's so awesome. But after probably a month or two, she said, everything you've asked me to do, which is like she was writing a story, and I had her read it to me, and it was kind of spicy, and she's like, oh, I hate it. And then she read it, and she enjoyed it. And I thought she was really enjoying herself of coming out of the shell. But she's like, everything you've asked me to do, I have absolutely hated. I have absolutely nothing you have done or had me do made me feel this is what I want to do. And I'm like, wow, I completely misread her. That had a big effect on me. My first munch, where it took me, 3 months of going back and going back and going back and finally going inside and having just some random person sit down and say, and I told them, I'm like, I'm just here. I don't know anything about it. I don't know what I am. I don't know who I am. And she's like, you're a dominant. I'm like, oh, okay. And from that moment on, I haven't looked back. I do have this desire to be in service, but it doesn't usually fit with the being dominant. A really big one is the Austin Mentors Program. It's a year-long program where every month you go and sit for a couple of hours talking to different leaders in the community. So you go and talk, and they'd tell you a little bit of their story. You would tell them a little bit of your story, and you learned who the leaders in the community were. You learned a lot about yourself because a lot of the lessons that they were teaching are self-reflective, and I learned a whole lot about myself. I had already been playing for several years when I went, but that program, reflecting back to learning about myself, really had a big impact too.
It's interesting to know that I'm not the only dominant that's not a mind reader. So thank you.
Yeah, my mental powers almost go to the front of my forehead, but not quite.
Yeah. I too have fell victim of that, where specific of, I think that person A, just for conversation's sake, I'm gonna do A, B, and C to them, and it's all the fun. I'm getting enjoyment, so surely they got to be getting enjoyment. I've asked them all the questions, but all the wrong questions, apparently. Right. Nonetheless, like, I personally appreciate those stumbling moments, those failing moments. They help me grow. They can, right?
Yeah, they do.
And also, specifically, like, if I had someone in my service and they said, hey, I really don't like this, but I did it for you, I'd appreciate that in many ways. Partly because they're offering service selflessly, which is big for me, but more so that I provided a safe enough space where they can communicate that with me, because ultimately that's one of my goals as well. And safety is a shared experience. We have to work together to create that safety. But just very thankful to know that I'm not the only one that's not a mind reader and makes mistakes.
I don't think you're the only one, but it may just be us too.
Okay, well, probably just us too. Yeah. It's probably all those free dominants. That's why they're free, because they just know it all.
They already know everything. They're mind readers. They know what you want. They know how to play you before you even really talk to you.
It's interesting you brought up the stalking. I'm actually in negotiations for quite a similar scene right now. Yeah, I think that there's large motivators for both sides for that. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of it simply is like the mental aspect of not knowing. I like to frame it as dread, right? And even for me, like when I've used Life 360 in the past for these types of scenarios, I'm just driving down the road, not thinking anything. Next thing you know, I happen to stop somewhere and I check Life 360 and you're 3 blocks away. And I'm just going to go over and take a picture of your car and send it to you and then not say anything. Right?
Yeah.
So for me, even a lot of that type of stuff is unscripted. My mantra when it comes to stalking, consensual abduction, or anything like this is it's not about the process. It's about the person and the feelings that you're trying to evoke.
Yeah. And I thought I was evoking that nervous excitement of being stalked and like, oh, this is great. I love this. This is what I'll, I always wanted somebody to do. And I'm like, I don't know how I could have read that wrong, more wrong than I did. So,
what did you do to correct that, if you don't mind me asking?
One night it got down to she's really conserved and shy, and I said, tonight I want you to sleep naked, because she never slept naked. And I'm like, I would like you to sleep naked tonight. And I got busy the next day and didn't really check in on her. And then I got this message of, I have done all the things that you have asked me to do. And sleeping naked was a huge thing for me because I am so afraid of a fire that if a fire happened, I would be naked and have to run out of my house naked. And you did not check on me the next day to see if I was okay. And that was a huge thing for me. And I'm like, I am so sorry. And she's like, it took probably a month, but I went back and she just ended all things right there. And it took me probably a month or two to go and say, I'm sorry. I should have checked up on you. And I have a recipe for a good apology. And I went through each and every step and say, this will never happen again. I will communicate better with you, and I will make sure that things are okay before I ask anything of anybody in the future, because you had this bad reaction. And will you please forgive me? And it took a couple of days, but she finally got around to say, I forgive you. It's okay. I'm not angry. It's just not going to work anymore. I'm like, okay, that was the end of that.
When you're revealing all our secrets, not only are we not mind readers, now we make mistakes and we apologize.
What?
Wow.
Yes, I apologize because I make mistakes and I misread people, and I'm not perfect. Professional, yes. Perfect, no.
Something that I found really important in your story was not only the fact that you apologized, but that your person accepted your forgiveness and vocalized it. For me, that's really important. I don't personally need to hear that you accepted my apology, but from my experience, a lot of people, it relieves a lot of mental anguish, for lack of better terminology, when you free them of that.
And I communicated that with her. I'm like, here is how I apologize. I will express my regret. I will take ownership of what I did. I will come up with some way that this is never going to happen again. And there's another one that I can't remember. And I will ask for, is there anything I can do to help heal the situation that I caused with my mistake? And will you please forgive me? And I told her, I need to hear the words, you are forgiven. That way, don't say them right now. When you are ready, say the words, you are forgiven. And that lifts that burden from me. Like you said, that's a lot of anguish of I messed with somebody's brain and I hurt them. and I feel horrible for it.
I like that. I'm gonna have to go back, and I might have to take some notes on that apology recipe. I I may be able. That might be one of them spaces that I can improve on a little bit. You know,
There's a book over here that's the recipe for it.
is it?
It's the people who did the 5 love languages. They did another book called the 5 apology languages. And
Oh yeah,
there's
I'm
5
familiar. Yeah, I'm actually familiar. It's one of my tests that I like to have people take.
And so that book's over on this side, non-kinky but useful books.
Sure. I didn't realize there was a book on it, so I imagine by the end of the night I will be ordering it.
The 5 apology languages.
I'm already looking it up. I really I like that you brought to attention that you have other books outside of the kink space. I've talked about it very often that most of my knowledge that wasn't surface level came from outside of the kink community.
Yeah.
There's so many great books on leadership and communication and conflict resolution and so on and so forth that escapes the BDSM community. Because I mean, if I'm just going to be crude, most of our books are about beating butts and fucking sluts, right? I mean, that's the cool stuff, right? We don't want to talk about how to say sorry as a master, how to receive forgiveness as a slave or a submissive.
Or as a
Nonetheless,
receiving forgiveness is a huge thing for me as a lifter kind of person. That's one of those things that you have to learn how to accept service. Some people don't know how to do that.
I think you might have thrown me under the bus a little bit without even realizing it. I struggle to accept forgiveness sometimes, forgiving myself when it comes to a lot of these dynamics. To some level, I may put an unrealistic expectation or responsibility. And when I fall hard. And more often, my person can forgive me much easier than I can forgive myself.
Yep.
And this is something where just over the last couple of years, part of, I have goals in all the facets of my life. One of my goals for my mental health is I deserve forgiveness. I deserve to forgive myself. I can't carry those unrealistic expectations. I don't care if I'm Master Daddy Dom 72, I'm still a Dustin when I wake up. I'm still liable to get sick, just like any other human. I'm still liable to make a mistake or so on and so forth, just like anybody else.
And you're just as liable to hurt somebody.
Absolutely.
And when that happens, you do have to forgive yourself as well as get forgiveness from the person who was hurt.
Makes me think of that, like if you fall off a horse, you got to get back on type of thing. I've talked a little bit about this in the rope community, and the phrase I like to use around it is restorative justice.
Justice, yeah.
And many times when there's a rope injury, people are ostracized from the community. And I've been pretty bold and blunt on my conversations with this. Is like, look, I've injured somebody. You let me here. I've also been suspending humans for like, carry the 2, add the 3, 16 or 18 years. I've injured 2 people. In all that time, nonetheless, I injured people. If you do anything long enough, you're going to make a mistake. And we need to have paths for specifically tops to have a place to learn. If you injured somebody in a TK just because like I know rope, then before you can play in the public space, let's take a couple TK classes, right? It shouldn't be that you're no longer allowed at rope space.
Right. You my action would be like, what went wrong with that TK?
Mm.
If I did something and that person got hurt, what did I do that caused that? And let me go fix that part. Um oh, you said something else and I forgot about it. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I mean, every chance I get, I try to drop that phrase restorative justice. And as a community, I'd really like to see we foster it more and more, because we have to take care of ourselves, and we are going to make mistakes, whether top or bottom. And we also need to create paths to rectify said mistakes. Otherwise, you're going to put people outside of the community where they cannot seek growth. They cannot find the experience that they need, and they're destined to more than likely repeat those same mistakes over and over, because now they're in an echo chamber and there's nobody to tell them how to do it correctly.
Another thing that happens is you can do everything right and something will still go wrong.
Absolutely.
And when that happens, you have to be able to forgive yourself because you did everything right, even though it came out wrong.
Well, my two injuries with rope, both of them were long-term partners, someone that I was tying weekly for over a year, both of them. And we didn't do much different. It was just a perfect storm, so to say, right? And more so, like I've talked about it, is we're reckless and we're pushing boundaries. And from my perspective, there wasn't much different, but there was some minutia. And after like looking back at it, we determined that this and this is probably what had the influence, even though we did it before, but just not in that same way. And, maybe she didn't drink as much or this, that, or the other. Nonetheless, like, no matter how long you do anything, no matter how good or experienced you are, to think that you're above making a mistake is naive or dangerous. I'll let you pick.
What's your next question?
Next question. All right, you're trying to keep me on topic. I'll appreciate it. All right. Could you share some insights into the challenges and lessons that you've learned during your early years in the BDSM community?
One of them is vetting people. Make sure that the person if somebody says, you ask, hey, I've seen you, I know that you played with this person before, you have a relationship with them, I'm interested in this person. Can you tell me a little bit about them? And if they say she's batshit crazy, listen to them. And don't go and say, well, what do you mean by that? And like, oh, you'll find out. Because you find out later, she's batshit crazy. And so I learned, when you're vetting people, listen to the people who tell you, hey, that person's not safe. That person's batshit crazy. That person is a heavy, heavy bottom. If you wanna wail on somebody, they want it, So you listen to those people. So vetting is a big thing for me. Starting out as a top for experienced bottoms in the community taught me a lot, because I learned not only the skills of playing with this person, because they would tell me, hey, do this differently, do that differently. I'm like, oh, okay. When you're doing a flogger, don't spend as much time up here because it actually hits the back of your head. And I'm like, oh, great. So I get a lot of this information about what it's like to be the bottom or what it's like to be the submissive. That had a huge effect on me and starting out. And so those are two of them. And me see. What are some of the other things that a community, having a community had a lot to do with my growth early on, because kink is not just what we do at the party. It's the people that make up that kinky community. And now I can hardly count people who are vanilla in my life, because all of the people that I bring into my life share this commonality with me, that they are kinky too. But kinky may include game night, where you go over to somebody's house and play games. It may be having people over for dinner. It's taking care of the elderly lady who lives by herself. That's all part of that community that I used to have in the church, and now I have it in my spiritual life again, because I get to serve the community. I teach classes. We have a couple of elderly members, and her husband died, and we went to her house and we cleaned and cleaned and cleaned. And when she came home from the hospital, her house was clean, and that just made a huge difference for her. So having that community is a huge part of my early development as well.
I think you hit on another big thing, and you're revealing more of our secrets. But part of being a master or a dominant is about service. At least from my perspective, I think that being a dominant or a master or a submissive or a slave is somehow about loss of self, somehow about service to something greater than you.
Yeah.
I believe it was Goddess Indigo that put this in my head some time ago, and she stated that if you serve me, then I can serve us. And that's always really, really made sense. And it's been really helpful for me, as I've made this more and more of a mantra when it comes to authority, to ensure that I keep the needs hierarchy in check, right?
Mm-hmm.
That my wants don't supersede their needs, because at the end of the day, my role in this relationship is to serve us, not me.
Right. And meeting, when I have somebody in my service, part of my job is to make sure that their needs are met. Not necessarily I have to meet all of them, because I have a slave here, Saili, that she has an eating disorder, and I cannot help her with this eating disorder. I'm not qualified. I don't have so I outsource this to a nutritional therapist. And so she goes to see a nutritional therapist. I'm still getting her need met for having support for her eating disorder, but I don't have to do it myself. If I have a submissive who wants to, play with another woman, I'm not going to be able to help with that. I can help find somebody that is trustworthy and experienced in all of the things that I trust, and then tell her, hey, here is this person that's available for meeting that need, because I can't meet that need. Some of them are physical, some of them emotional, some of them are mental. But part of my job is to meet their needs, but I don't have to be the one who meets them.
Man, you keep pulling back all these secrets on us.
I know, I'm telling them all.
But it's really important, though, whether you're poly or not. I think that that word has really been diluted. But in the case of you and your person, There is a medical need or a mental health need, however you want to frame that, that is outside of your experience or expertise.
Yeah.
And the most dominant thing, in my opinion, that you can do is to recognize that you don't have the capability to handle this, and to demonstrate your responsibility by delegating that to someone that has the expertise to handle that. And that goes back to, that's still your authority. It's not that you're not meeting their needs, because in my opinion, from my perspective, outside looking in, you're absolutely meeting their needs. I mean, you're encouraging, and at least from what I know, you're encouraging them and possibly even enforcing them to pursue
Help
this.
somewhere else.
Yes.
In the right place. You know, I'm not a therapist. I cannot be somebody's therapist.
Mm.
But a lot of what I do is therapeutic.
Mm-hmm.
Like the beating and crying this afternoon, very therapeutic for her. But I am not a therapist. I can't do that. So I outsource that to somebody who is qualified to do that.
Well, and I've touched on it a little bit before, that while BDSM can be therapeutic or cathartic, it is not a replacement for actual therapy.
It is not.
Best case, it's a supplement, I would say.
And I have worked with people's therapists. I have talked to their therapist, and their therapist and I communicate, like, what is this person needing? What is this person looking for from my services, from the therapist's point of view?
Are them in that, your experience with that, were the therapists that you've discussed with, were they kink friendly or kink aware?
One of them I know is kink aware, and she actually said, you know what you need to do? You need to make a class for therapists explaining kink. So that's